You're listening to a bonus episode of the Bird Dog Babe podcast with my mom and dad, Courtney and William Bastian.
The way I do that is I trade them. If they're food motivated, I'll trade them with a treat. If they're praise oriented, I'll trade them with a bunch of praise. Or I'll trade them with an object, another object of equal or greater value. So give me that, I'll give you this. Or even just throwing, getting their attention with another one and throwing it back down to that area so they can go back on another retrieve. But I just stress not to just keep grabbing these things out of your puppy's mouth. And I know sometimes, they're running around a house and they're grabbing your kid's socks and everything like that, and your first instinct is to get mad and go over and grab and rip it out of your puppy's mouth. Got to be careful with that, because the dog's going to remember all those times. It's like, every time I brought something of great value and I really liked it, you just rip it out of my mouth. And you could possibly run into problems down the line.
Hey bird dog babes, my name is Courtney Bastian and I am obsessed with all things bird dogs. And I'm here with you to share the stories, experiences, knowledge, and opinions from the women and a few guys in the industry that are killing it. I'm a Wisconsin girl living in a Montana world. I'm mom and two incredible kiddos, wife and occasional assistant to a pro gun dog trainer, traveling the U.S. talking about canine nutrition while hunting, breeding, and competing with my German wire hair pointers and Bracco Italianos. As someone who started hunting later in life because I wanted to give my dogs the opportunity to do what they were bred to do, I'm here to help inspire, educate, and connect women to get their bird dogs out in the field and experience a bond like no other. So pour yourself a glass of wine and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. This is the Bird Dog Babe podcast. So you might be thinking, what's going on? It's Saturday. Episodes from my favorite podcast, The Bird Dog Babe, usually come out on Tuesday mornings. Yep, you're right. But today kicks off the first of my new bonus series that focuses on training. And I couldn't think of anyone I'd rather spend an hour with on a Friday morning locked in my closet than with my husband, William Bastian, trainer at Claddagh Kennel. One Saturday per month, he's coming on the podcast to share what he's learned in his past 16 years of training dogs from birth to master hunter, versatile champion, and dual champion. He doesn't train by a program. He trains each dog to what suits them best and only takes 6 dogs in at a time to be sure he can dedicate the time needed for each dog to be successful. Today we're starting at the very beginning and sharing some training tips that start in the whelping box as early as 3 days old and cover all things bringing up better bird dogs up until 6 months old. So let's get after it. So we are starting a mini series of training tips and tricks.
If you want to call it mini.
Why?
Because it can get pretty big.
Okay. Well, yeah. We're gonna start. And I thought, okay, well, what topic do we hit first? And we
start right from the beginning.
Right
from the beginning.
Right from the very beginning. Let's skip the how to breed dogs part because Heidi Kellerman covered that pretty well for us. But let's say once puppies are on the ground, when we're trying to mold them to be excellent companions and bird dogs, where do we start in that training and development portion? And we're thinking at first, let's talk about 8 weeks old and what people do when they get their new puppy. And then we said, no, there's actually a lot that happens right out of the whelping box is where kind of it forms and starts good habits. So I think the very first time period for that is going to be
early stimulation.
I was
going
to
say
the biosensor puppy, yeah.
And this will get them ready for the evaluation itself. It'll just get them all used to being handled and touched, and where the evaluation process should not be an issue unless the puppy really has some temperament issues.
Yeah.
So, you want to dip into what?
Is that what it's called? Yeah, it's the biosensor puppy And it's by Carmen Battaglia. So if I could put the link in our show notes too.
It's going to be harder to explain, but check it out in the show notes.
And the next important timeline is going to be around 3 to 4 weeks old, adding a litter box into the puppy area so that they can do, and it's usually around 3.5 weeks. I think like we've put it in at 3 weeks before and it was a little too early. And then we've done it at 4 weeks and it's like, oh, we should have put this in a little bit earlier.
It's really on how the puppies start developing. So if they're up and walking around and really moving about, maybe a little earlier. I would say earlier is always better than later, so that you can form that habit right away. But yeah, it's usually around 3 to 4 weeks is when they're ready to get the litter box.
Yeah, and what that does is it teaches them different areas of this is where I eat, this is where I sleep, this is where I play, and this is where I go potty. And I think a lot of the time, the boys will cheat. When you see them all starting to use the litter box, the boys will put their 2 front feet in there and then pee on the outside.
Maximum effort. Yeah.
Boys. But no, I think that starts it right there. And I think when new owners get their puppies, they're pretty grateful that, and we've been told that the potty training is super easy. They get the concept right away once they know their order of a house because they're able to translate that right from...
Yeah, we've gotten some really, really good feedback. It makes our lives easier because it kind of develops a cleaner puppy, one that doesn't like a mess.
Right. So when they're left to be raised in a concrete kennel run, they're not really forced, but they're just put in an environment where they are doing everything all in the same place. And I get that it's easier for people to be able to go in a couple times a day and spray down the run. But the puppies really aren't learning that concept of separating their different areas out, and they tend to be a messier puppy. And we know that because we've bought several that were raised that way. And it's not a bad way. It's just if you have the time and you have the space and the setup to be able to put a litter box in, which can be just a pan that goes under a washing machine.
Yeah,
that's what we used for years.
Yeah,
and just put a puppy pad in there, and then put the pellets over top of that. But you're going to notice when they're 5 or 6 weeks that they start pulling the puppy pad out.
Yeah, that's when I usually pull the puppy pad out.
Yeah, Purina makes a really great product called Yesterday's News, and that's a recycled. It's
paper.
It's like in the kitty litter aisle, but that stuff rocks. It absorbs really well.
Yeah,
and it smells good. Yeah,
there's not much smell to it at all.
The wood pellets are cheaper, but there is a little bit of an odor with that.
Yeah, the urine odor will still stick around.
Yep. Okay, so after potty training, then we go to about 6 weeks old? When do puppies get on birds for the first time at a breeder's house?
Let's go back. Let's talk about the Enrichment Center.
Okay.
Because that's going on during potty training as well.
Yeah.
And what an enrichment center is, or an enrichment box, or whatever you want to call it, it's basically like a playground for your puppies. Makes noise, makes them get into new touches and feels all the time. They're running through. We've had like metal paint buckets and brushes and loud spoons hanging, all kinds of different things. And it's going to help produce a more bold puppy. Something that's not going to be afraid of anything new or loud. And sometimes even having more than one of these or changing it up on them during the whole period so everything changes with them is good. And it's just like an everyday thing. Pretty soon they're running around and ripping that thing apart.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that we learned at the beginning when we started breeding too, is we wanted them in a quiet area. You know, we didn't want anybody stressed. And then we noticed when they were maybe around 7 weeks, we would go in there, and if you drop a dog, like the puppy pan, that they would just all hit the deck and be scared. So, it's things like that you learn after time of noises all the time. And now we're really grateful to have these 2 loud children in our lives.
They do a lot for us.
Yeah.
More than we give them credit for, I think, with the dogs. But yeah.
Yep. All right. So after the enrichment box.
Intro to birds. I wouldn't even say it's, I guess it is an intro to birds. But we're doing it more on an evaluation kind of standpoint. And this is usually done around 7 weeks. I'll first probably wing lock a pigeon or pull some flight feathers out of a quail or a chucker, usually a quail, and just let the dogs interact with it. And you kind of get to see which each puppy acts around a bird like that, how confident they are. It gives you a lot of different things. But then we'll go into actually evaluating their nose by bringing them out into some higher cover and hiding that quail and just kind of seeing how they react when they go through or go into the scent cone. At some point, some go in to investigate. But it's just a way for us to kind of see where each individual's at.
Touch a little bit on the wing on the string idea. I know it's a touchy thing. It's just I feel a lot of times because of the book that was published years and years ago, where he wrote about wing on the string being so good for puppies, and but can you touch on that? Do you and if we do it, and if owners should be doing it at home?
This is kind of, I don't think there's any harm into it unless you do it way too much. I don't think there's a need to do it once you get your puppy at 8 weeks. We do it every once in a while just to kind of see how pointy the puppies are. Sometimes I'll just use a plastic bag, not even a wing, and just something that moves fast and makes a little bit of a sound just to get their attention.
Used a dust mop a couple weeks ago with our puppy.
Yeah, but
it's just a sight pointing aspect. It's not
completely sight pointing, but it still gives you a kind of indication if they're just going to run it down or if they're going to really just point everything they see move. At that age, that's not going to say that dog's going to be like the ultimate pointing machine if it points a wing on a string or whatnot. I mean, that can totally be trained, so I don't put much credit into it. If we do it, which we don't do that often, if we do it, it's maybe like one time and that's it. But I don't think there's any harm in doing it if you want to see your puppy point with a wing on a string, but I wouldn't recommend doing it all the time. I think it may make the puppy rely on sighting more than anything. I really want to get that puppy developing their nose before more than anything. So,
and then at 8 weeks old, so we do kind of down to a T where it's 8 weeks plus or minus 3 days as a structure evaluation, because we put so much into having good confirmation in the dogs that we breed. It lessens the risk of injury. A puppy that has slip hocks, and there's some really easy ways to learn just kind of basic structure 101, but you wouldn't want to place that in a competitive home or an agility home, but most people would never even know that there was a slip hock issue throughout the entire life of the dog. But it's something that if they were put in a competitive home, they'd break down earlier than life. But good top lines, good tail sets. If you like style like we do, we like good style in the dogs when they're on point. You can assess some of that stuff at this age, but it is right at plus or minus 3 days off of 8 weeks old. And when you're going through evals, thinking which puppy is going where, I do want to warn you that the new owners do get very, very anxious because they're going to be there right at 8 weeks old to pick up their puppy. And to learn 3 days beforehand of which one they're getting isn't something that a lot of them are very happy about. But if they respect you as a breeder and your evaluations, then it works out just fine.
I think it's important. That time frame is definitely important to make sure it's plus or minus 3 days from 8 weeks, and keeping the puppies 8 weeks. Sometimes I would think I'd just rather keep them even longer just to see more out of them development-wise. You really get a good idea what the temperament's like, and especially if you're placing puppies as a breeder into the homes. We've been doing this quite a long time, so we know what puppies are going to be like when they grow up typically. We're not 100%, that's for sure, but we'll just make sure that they get into the right homes, because if you put a too much dog into a not enough family, it's a recipe for disaster, and it's not fair for that dog to have to come back and have to be rehomed. So
yeah, it's always kind of puzzled me how some will do picks based on how quickly somebody got their deposit in to reserve a puppy. If you got deposit in first, you get pick of the litter, and like, holy cow, because the breeder knows that those puppies best. And for someone to come in and say, oh, that one's really outgoing, that's the one I want, then they get it, and then it might be just way too much dog for them, or one that's really shy and is going to a competitive home. So trust your breeder. Keep in really good contact with your breeder, and they should be able to pick out the one that would best fit what you're looking for. Temperament-wise, that is something that we take the entire litter off premises and usually have 3 outside people evaluate the puppies.
So they're in a completely strange environment for the first time. They're getting handled by strangers, usually not for the first time, but having that done really will tell a lot of things. And you got somebody that's unbiased looking at your puppies too, which really helps.
Yeah. And there's different kind of temperament testing regimens. Like there's a Voller test. There's quite a bit out there. I think we don't personally do one specifically. What I like to see is a stranger in a strange place being able to flip each puppy upside down in their arms like they're cradling them. And I'm showing you a picture here, like anybody can actually see what I'm doing. But putting them upside down, and then putting your other hand over top of them. And if the puppy is just relaxed and lays there, and it looks you in the eyes in a settled manner, that's a nice sound puppy. If you have one that is kind of wiggling all over and won't look at you,
just wants down,
that's something to be aware of. They might have a stronger willed, is what we found, because we've had several of those. And it's not by any means a bad dog. It's just a very strong willed that might have a bit of cooperation issues, which, again, we will admit we've had a lot of those. But then there's the puppy that clenches down and shakes, like they'll wrap their 2 front legs around your hand, clenched and kind of shaky, and again won't meet eye contact with you. So a couple things there to keep in mind. All right, so owners have their new puppies, 8 weeks old.
8 weeks old. So this is going to kind of be some stuff to work on between 8 weeks and 5 months old or 6 months old. I just say that because I typically do not take a dog in for training until they're at least 6 months old. There are some instances that I may take one earlier, but it's a really maybe advanced, developed puppy and ready to go early. There are some of those, but I'll definitely have to evaluate it before I bring it in. But some things to touch on, the things that you can work on. at home by yourself is pretty easy stuff. But if you're going to send your dog off to a trainer, by all means, don't do nothing. Because it causes a lot of issues and a lot of problems, and we can definitely tell when that happens, because it'll save you more money, and you'll have a better dog in the end if you work on these basic things at home.
Oh, so crate training.
We'll get into that.
But then we start that at 7 weeks old. So
Yeah.
at the breeder's house, we start crating them separately every night to try to help the new owner get rid of those.
That first night blues with the puppy singing.
Yeah, so
We've
that they're
already
used
done
to
that here.
Yep. But that's something to continue doing when they get home, and just one of the most important parts of it.
Yes. So I'm going to go over some topics. I think one of the most important one to do when you get your puppy home is socialization. Another thing is to work on is recall, kennel training, basic obedience. You can start doing a little retrieving, and bird intro. So why don't we get right into socialization? So just getting your puppy out into a wide variety of new places. Go through different covers, walking through high grass, short grass, woods, depending upon what kind you're going to be hunting. But just take your dog on fun puppy walks through all kinds of different things. You want to get them introduced to other dogs, busy places, just as much as you possibly can do. That dog should be coming with you anytime you can possibly bring a dog somewhere. Bring it with.
And even going to puppy socialization class.
Yep.
You know, we've all raised dogs forever and ever and ever, and but we still take puppies through a puppy socialization class if we can, or we even talk about starting our own one here. But what that is, you just play things like pass the puppy. They get to go around other dogs that are large breed, small breed, crazy, shy.
It's not so much as just for like teaching them basic obedience. It's not like they're going to do huge strides just with that socialization and getting passed around to different people and playing with a wide variety of different dogs. It's a big thing. It's going to help produce a more bold puppy who's comfortable in just about any environment. And definitely when you're trying to build a really nice hunting dog, you really want it to be bold and comfortable anywhere you put it. Calm and comfortable. Anything else? Touch on with socialization?
I don't think so. Like, you know, I think it's just as good to be aware, like when you're going to like a NAVDA training day with a new puppy and you're excited to get them out and meet other dogs, of maybe how to approach that.
Okay. Just you want to definitely tell people that I do have a young puppy. I want him to get introduced to different people and different dogs, but you got to be careful because not every dog's going to be really happy to have a puppy jumping on them. So I would definitely go to your training day or training NAVDA or wherever you want to go, your club, and just ask around, and there'll be people that'll say, oh, my dog loves puppies, and that'd be a good candidate to have your dog be with. So just be aware that not every dog's going to be thrilled with a new puppy. So, and
not every owner realizes that their dog also isn't going to be thrilled with a new puppy. Yeah. So, yeah. And once a puppy has a bad experience, some can recover okay, and then some others are going to take quite a bit of work to bring around. So try to keep everything positive. Don't put them on a flexi and take around to meet people. Keep them on a leash where you have a shorter leash, where you have complete control over the situation if you need to take that control.
Yeah. That kind of brings us into the next one, is a recall, which is huge. I think that's the number 2 on my book of things that a young dog should learn. Just for the fact of that needs to be strong. It builds a bond. That dog should trust you every time it comes back to you. It's going to get something good. The way I do it is I use target training with a clicker. Really young, like 8 weeks. Sometimes if I'm keeping my puppy early, we'll even do it earlier. And basically what you're doing is you're putting a treat in your hand, an open hand, and that's your target. So you want the puppy to come run to that target, touch its nose on your hand, and I personally use a clicker, but you can use a cue word of yes, okay, or whatever you want to use, and instantly that puppy's going to get that treat that's in your middle finger, and you're going to pop it in their mouth. And as soon as they come to you every time, they're going to get that treat, that positive reinforcement of, I come to you, I get something yummy. Let's say your puppy is not food motivated. So there are many different kinds of praise. So your dog may love some ear scrubs or belly rubs or just being excited around.
Who's
a
good boy?
There you go. But
that's what Brocco's like.
You have to find what really gets your puppy excited and what makes them happy. So that's with any kind of dog training. You're getting and you're learning your dog. So just marking the behavior that you're looking for, and that with a clicker or a cue word is going to be great.
We're going to do a video of this too. If you're one of my Patreon patrons, you're going to have a video of everything we're covering today to be able to actually see what he's talking about, because sometimes it's explaining it, it's hard to imagine what it looks like. Mm-hmm. And then you have questions, and so of course we can always jump on a Zoom conversation there and answer questions about it. And if you're trying it and say my dog's doing this, we can have some consulting on there and see what's going on.
Yeah. So with anything like this, you want to make sure it starts out in a controlled environment, quiet, no distractions, to really get that a puppy cued into you. Sometimes you get a really bold puppy, you may have to start in the hallway and where it's got nowhere to go but you're going to start building that those first steps early on. If you need a check cord, you can go to a check cord, but a lot of times if you start this right away, that's not necessary. So recall, very important.
Safety too.
Yes, makes everything else easier. So we'll go into the next one, kennel training. I get a lot of dogs in that have never ever been in a kennel. This makes problems. Not just for me, but I think it will also cause problems when that owner wants to go on a trip, or let's go on our first hunting trip, and the dog's stress is completely out in the kennel and barks and won't eat, and there's just so many underlying problems that can happen if your dog isn't kennel trained properly. So keeping a pup in a correct size kennel will be very beneficial. It needs to be comfortable and calm in that crate. It should be like its second home. So feeding in the crate, treating as it goes into the crate, marking that behavior when it goes in the crate is all things that you can do to help that puppy really like that crate.
Touching on what you said about correct kennel size, so a lot of times you don't want to buy 3 or 4 different kennels to accommodate the size of your puppy. So there are companies that make
dividers.
Yeah, make a crate that comes with a divider. So as the puppy grows, you just move that divider back, because they don't like to go potty where they're sleeping. Well, some will.
Some of the messy ones will, but typically when we see it, they really don't want to be in their filth.
Yeah.
So let's just touch on what is a correct size kennel. So basically when a young dog is to be created, you really just want that puppy to be able to turn around, stand up comfortably. They shouldn't really have any other space. So they shouldn't have enough room to go over to another area and go to the bathroom. Because they will separate a too big of a kennel out. They'll go pee in one corner and they'll sleep in the other. So
bedding too.
And bedding. It needs to be small enough where that dog wants to get out when it has to go to the bathroom. It's going to start telling you when it needs to go out. And it's just going to make potty training so much easier.
So no bedding, but we do use the Primo pads. So it's a pad that you can put on the bottom of the kennel, and then there's zip ties around the base so they can't pull it up and chew it, but it does give them some cushion at the bottom so it's not a hard surface.
They're pretty slick pads. They're really
Clean
durable.
Up really well.
They're waterproof, dang near chew proof. I mean, it's really a really good product. We've been using them for quite a few years. Next one, I would say, would be basic obedience. So what I use is a reward-based obedience. I wouldn't say a program because I don't really do a program. It's all individually to the dog, but I really push a positive reinforcement. Some things that I'll do with a puppy is sit. I know that's a big thing in the hunting world, as people say, never teach your pointing dog to sit. Well,
the show world too.
I believe that dogs are super, super smart, and they definitely know the difference with commands. So I've done a lot of things with a lot of dogs at very high levels, and I'll tell you, every single one of them knows how to sit. So I think that's a falsity, and when people say that, they're just maybe don't want to deal with a dog that knows how to sit really well, because when you start to train a dog, say if I get a dog in for training and the owner did a lot of obedience and did a lot of good things right, and I'm trying to teach it something, and the dog gets a little confused, the first thing that young dog's going to do is go back to what it knows. So it sits with me. You know, as a trainer, do I get frustrated and say, well, why did you teach this dog to sit? No, the dog learned to sit. That's good. Now we just need to teach it how to do what we need to teach it to do, and they can definitely understand the difference between the two. You just need to train it. Quit complaining and train your dog. So sit, very good thing for the dog to learn. Walking on a leash, not so much, we're not working on healing, but we're working on just having the dog be comfortable on a leash. Not pulling, it should just go to the end of the leash and kind of not tug. It should just feel that pressure and go back. That's one thing that I really like to do, and really starting to do more of, is just staking out a young puppy. They're going to sit there and pull and pull and pull at the end of the stake. They're going to.
Can you describe that a little bit when you say stake out? So somebody that might not know what that means.
So it's a post that's pound down into the ground with I'll use a cable for a young puppy because the chain's a little big, but just a cable. I would say they're, I don't know, 12 inches long, or
they're probably 2 feet.
2 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just clipped to their collar, and just let them sit out there with a bowl of water and in a shady area, and just let them learn on their own. They're going to sit there and pull and pull and pull and feel that pressure, and then they're going to stop. And they're going to go, oh, this is way more comfortable not pulling. So this is, the dog's learning on their own here. And then just taking them on walks, and then when they start to feel that pressure again, just like it was on that cable, that they're gonna go back with that pressure. So just teaching your dog to walk on a leash is big. Stay, whoa, whatever you want to use it, whatever commands you want to use. Wait to go outside, waiting to go inside the doorways. A good idea to do when you're doing all this training is use your feeding times as training times. Especially if you have a food motivated puppy, don't waste that food of just here's your dinner or here's your breakfast. Make that dog do something for it. they're super smart. They're little sponges at this age, and you can really get a really nice stay in a place and that kind of stuff just during feeding time.
And if you are going to be sending your dog off to a trainer, you basically just gave yourself 1 to 2 free months of training.
Yeah.
At least 1 month. Right?
For sure.
By crate training and just giving it basic obedience of, yeah.
That's just all stuff that I'm going to have to do, and it could have been, and it's much easier when they're younger, before they're 6 months old and just wild childs. If you have all of that foundation done before it does come, man, it just saves you a ton of money. Like, we can get into the stuff that you really want. We're really sending them to me in the first place. We can get to that right away. If the socialization's done right, I mean, I don't have to worry about them coming in and stressing out. They're adapting really fast, and they're just ready to work. It really, really will save you tons.
Oh, yeah.
In the end.
Because they've learned how to form a bond, to have focus, have discipline, and patience. Yeah. And handle situations.
Some other things you can teach your dog is a place. Just an area like a place board or a rug or something, just some place to go and sit or down or whatever you want to do with them. That way it's just an area you can put them, and they need to know that they can go when that command's done. They go over there, and that's their area.
A good time to do that is during family meal times.
Yeah, feeding times.
Yeah. Yep. So
you got to go over there to eat. You got to go over there and get a treat. Or another command is down. I don't typically do this a ton with my dogs, but some of them do. I don't use that as much as a sit or stay or whoa or something. But all this stuff is off a reward base with a clicker as well. So it's all done by marking the response that I want using a clicker, and then directly with a treat. So all positive. Some retrieving. You can really start building good manners with retrieving at a young age. Promote that puppy to hold and carry, and I like to start in a hallway, or maybe make up a little fenced area where they can go down, or they have nowhere else to go but go get that object. Big tip is always use more than one object, and the objects have to be of as great a value as the one you just threw. Never just take these objects out of your puppy's mouth. You're going to promote a puppy that's like, if I go to you, you're just going to take it. So you want to build them to want to come to you and want to give you that object. And the way I do that is as I trade them. If they're food motivated, I'll trade them with a treat. If they're praise oriented, I'll trade them with a bunch of praise, or I'll trade them with another object of equal or greater value. So give me that, I'll give you this. Or even just throwing, getting their attention with another one and throwing it back down to that area so they can go back on another retrieve. But I just stress not to just keep grabbing these things out of your puppy's mouth. And I know sometimes, they're running around a house and they're grabbing your kid's socks and everything like that, and your first instinct is to get mad and go over and grab and rip it out of your puppy's mouth. Got to be careful with that, because the dog's going to remember all those times. It's like, every time I brought something of great value and I really liked it, you just rip it out of my mouth. And you could possibly run into problems down the line. It's just a lot easier to build it and stay consistent with it from start all the way on.
Because it's a really fun keep away game for them then.
Yes, keep away can become a really fun game for a puppy. So they'll grab things, and if you chase them around, they're just gonna keep running, and they think this is just so much fun.
And I just want to touch on the fact that I learned this lesson, and you reminded me, because I have this young Bronco girl that loves wood. She got off the plane and started eating wood since the day she arrived. And so and we have downed logs all around our yard that we continue to try to clean up. But she does this keep away game with logs. And so when she finally would get back, I would have been so mad and frustrated. And then my sweet husband here would remind me, don't yell at her when she comes back. And so he said, oh, good girl, you little son of a bitch. But as long as you're saying it in a really happy manner, you can use any word phrase that you want with them, but do not get on their case that they were bad for finally coming back to you.
Because in the end, they did come back. They did give you that object on their own, so it needs to be, okay, good.
Even though you're very frustrated.
But this all goes back to recall and stuff like that. So keep away can be troublesome. So always promote positive response when they come back to you. Start in a controlled environment. I might have said that already, but make it fun. Do not overdo this. Do it a little bit at a time. Make sure it's super fun and quit. What else we got here?
Bird intro?
All right. Yeah, you can definitely, it depends on what you have access for birds, but it don't take a lot. You just kind of want to get them used to, birds in general. Say your breeder didn't do this. We'll be doing this with our puppies before they go home. But the same kind of thing as we discussed earlier on in the intro to birds is you're going to use a wing-lock pigeon. You're going to pull some flight feathers off of a quail. You're going to let that puppy investigate, grab it, carry it around, and stuff just to get them used to having feathers in their mouth and understanding and start building that bird is something of really great value. This goes back to the retrieving thing is don't be grabbing that bird right out of their mouth. You're going to create a keep away game. So you got to have something of equal or greater value to take that bird away from them again. We're just looking for the pup to have confidence with that bird, picking up, playing. And then you can get into hiding those birds, working on their scent, their nose. Don't get frustrated if the pup doesn't point to start out. But you're going to start building that pup to go find that bird. When you start to hide these things, you don't want to have I like to let them fly. So actually before that whole process, when you start introducing, and you've already had the puppy picking the bird, you've already had the puppy being confident on birds. So then you're going to fly some birds around that puppy as sight pointing them, really. You're going to show that bird to that puppy. It's going to probably point it. You're going to reinforce it with a fly. And they may chase it. They may get excited. You're building drive. You do this a lot with young dogs. And then we start hiding those birds fully flighted. And just let them walk around, scent it. If they don't point, that's fine. They're going to walk in, they're going to bump it up, it's going to fly away, and then sooner or later that pup's going to point. If it's in the genetics, it'll come out and it'll point. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about it right away.
Yeah. Can you touch on a little bit? So, you have a new puppy, and you go to NAVDA training day, and it's your turn to go out in the field. You beforehand you reserve 3 birds to go have your session in the field, and at training days everybody is amazingly helpful, but I think it's a good idea to keep in mind everybody does things differently, and what you may be told to do today, somebody else might tell you to do differently elsewhere.
The next
so respect that and take in what works best for you and your dog. But, what should somebody who's taking a dog that's a puppy under 6 months old to NAVHDA training days, and you get out to the field, your 3 chukka are planted out there, and they say, okay, what is it you want to work on today? What should be the goal there as a young pup?
Well, I think it kind of depends on your puppy. Sometimes at 6 months old, those puppies are running around pointing and good with the gun and all that by then.
Right.
But you know your puppy the best. So when you go to a training day, you need to discuss it with your handler. Some training days are run by different people, like she said. So you might go one time and they may want to do one thing. Just tell them what you want. If my puppy, we're working on pointing now, so I want if you got access to pigeons would probably be the best.
Birds they can't catch.
Yeah, you want to kind of get away with that. If you're using other ones, you might want to use a check cord. But my advice when you go into those things is take what you want that's going to work best for your puppy, and leave the rest. Don't forget about it, because you may need that kind of stuff for another dog down the line, because certain things work better for different dogs. So, and usually in NAVHDA especially, there's a lot of educated people out there who've done a lot of different things, and there's a lot of methods out there. Don't throw away somebody's method because it's not what you're doing. Pay attention, listen to it, and it may help you out when you get down the road on something else. So, but always cater your dog to what works best for your puppy. I guess what I can stress the most is when you're going to these things is don't confuse your puppy. And what I mean by that is you're on a path, you've picked a method, it's working for your puppy, or it may not be working yet, but don't totally change your method and start something different because somebody had said, this is how I do it. If you start doing that and going from one method to another method to another method, it's going to confuse that dog, and your consistency is going to go not be as strong as well. So
what about intro to Gunfire?
Intro to Gunfire.
Are you doing that before 6 months old?
Tip for my dogs, I will, but usually when dogs come in, I'll be doing that at 5 to 6 months. So that's something they really got to be careful with. So a lot of people will wait on that and send it when they send it to me because they don't want to screw it up. Gun shy dogs, I believe, is completely 100% man-made. It's definitely related to temperament and that, but with any dog, I think it's created, and it's created by us. So it's something you definitely need to be careful with, and be very, very vigilant on how your puppy reacts with sounds and stuff. So if you have a really sound leery puppy on anything, it's something to really watch. So the way we do it here, I guess, to really introduce the gun is you gotta have your dog bird crazy. I mean, it needs to be just loving birds, chasing birds, and when they're out chasing birds, and when that's what's on their mind, we'll start shooting. And when I start shooting, I'm shooting with a low sound, so a 22 cap, a low 22 cap. They come in different levels. So you can get a 22 cap gun that sounds larger than a shotgun to start out with. So, but the dog's got to be out there and it's got to be totally focused on that bird. And then when you're doing it for the first time, you have to really watch that puppy, how it reacts on that first shot. And the goal is that dog will not even not even hear that gunfire. I mean, they're so focused and so excited on that bird that gunfire is just background noise, and that's exactly what you kind of want to hear. You kind of want to get to, and just doing that's going to start associating that gunfire with that excitement of that bird and that love for those birds. So gunfire becomes a super positive thing. So in the end, when they start, say you're running NA, I love to watch those puppies. When it's really, really properly done. You shoot that gun at the beginning of that test when they're out, and the dog reacts, but it reacts looking for a bird, because gunfire means birds. That's proper introduction.
Cool.
That'll keep you busy for when you get your puppy at 8 weeks on.
Yeah, you covered a lot there. And again, all these things that we talked about will be on video. We've, by the time this is aired tomorrow morning, less than 24 hours, it'll already have been put on patreon.com/birddogbabe. And a video demonstration of all these will be available on there. To get on there, it's $5 a month commitment. So, but I think a really good value. Anything else you want to touch on with puppies?
I guess just make it fun. Don't overdo it. This should be a super fun thing. So just go out and play with your puppies.
What about e-collar intro? Is any of that recommended before 6 months old? And I'm saying this coming from a place of knowing somebody that just put a force fetch on a 13-week-old puppy. So can we just touch on that a little bit?
It kind of comes down to the puppy and how bold it is as well. But I don't feel a need to do that in that time period. Collars are a great tool. They definitely are, when used properly. But they can be very damaging if you don't understand them. I mean, the training has to be done first before you do anything with a collar. So all this has to be done without a collar before you even before you can put a collar on it anyways. So I would say you don't need it. You don't need it until the dog understands and has learned the tasks already. Saying that I do use e-collars, but it needs to be conditioned properly, and I guess we can go over that too, and show people how to do that too, because it is something that can be damaging if not used correctly.
But you've used it on vibrate mode to get puppies' attention if they're a really high-driven pup for a recall on a check cord.
I've used vibrate to start to introduce pressure. I'll take a whole bunch of puppies out together, and when they're super play and excited and roughhousing together, I'll peel one off just with vibrate, just so they start to really understand that recall. But all that target and stuff has already been done, so I mean they already understand the recall and the training already. Basically, we're just overlaying a collar to the task they already know, and that's where a collar becomes really useful. And then you have a 2-mile leash, so you got to teach them before you can overlay that collar. But just introducing the collar and finding their pressure and what pressure works best for that dog, because they're all so different. Some are really tough and some are barely take any pressure at all. So I think that's the main thing, is finding that pressure, that level, the level that best suits your dog, and that would be collar conditioning. Is teaching that dog what that pressure means. So, but for the most part, you can get away with not using a collar until they get older. You have a plenty to work on before you're ready to overlay a collar anyway. So if you have any questions on that whole aspect, I would definitely seek out somebody that's educated on how to use one so you can properly do it correctly. Because I'm not bad-mouthing a collar. They're amazing tools. They've come a long ways.
Well, when we were in college and you had the Weimaraner and I had the Irish Setter, and we took them both through the obedience course with a trainer there that's actually now really well known, and she's just emailed me this week. She's agreed to come on for an episode to tell listeners about proper e-collar use. So that's pretty exciting.
She's really heavy on the e-collar. I mean, I shouldn't say heavy, but she was definitely really reliant on it, and I'm sure she's going to really give you guys some really good tips on how to introduce that collar, because basically her whole entire training philosophy is built around that collar.
Mm-hmm.
Not really my cup of tea, being that I like to teach a dog the test before I use the collar, but it's a different method. Yep. Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Well, our next episode on this little mini series is going to be in a month. We'll try to do the second Saturday of every month. But saying that, I know your schedule is touch and go with where you're going for hunt tests and field trials and NAVDA tests. So then when hunting season comes, you may not be here at all.
No, we'll do our best to make it work.
Yeah. But okay. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Bird Dog Babe podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and learned something from the content, please share it with your friends. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on whichever platform you're listening from. Check out the show notes for links to references from this episode, as well as info on how to connect through Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you're loving this podcast and want to support the production and content, please consider becoming one of my Patreon patrons. Being a patron connects us more on a personal level, where I'm able to help answer questions and give advice. My husband William and I have bred, owned, and trained AKC Master Hunters, Field Champions, NAVDA VCs, and AKC Show Champions. We're excited to not only share what we've learned, but also listen from previous and future episode guests for additional content. Go to patreon.com/thebirddogbabe and $5 per month and you're in. And as always, 2% goes to conservation. Until next week, Bird Dog Babes, keep them versatile.